Are you currently frozen by a sense of fear of what lies ahead for you and your loved one? Does not knowing what caregiving challenges are around the corner for you keep you up at night? Recently, I had these thoughts and feelings, and over the course of a couple of months, I was able to coach myself through this experience and come to terms with my wife's most recent decline and conquer the fear of what lied ahead. Welcome to the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast. I'm your host, Ken Cardita. In this podcast, I share with you my experiences and learnings from the last 13 years as I've walked by the side of my dear wife, Shanna, as she progresses through Alzheimer's disease. It is my desire that you'll find joy and peace while learning to live with your loved one's disease, and not let the disease define you or your loved one. The Surviving Alzheimer's podcast is brought to you by Ascending Minds, LLC. Welcome to episode 24 of the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast. Today, I will share with you how I dealt with my wife's recent physical decline over the last few months, and the experiences that she's gone through and how it affected my attitude and how it affected how I felt about what was going on and how I dealt with the fear that came along with seeing her decline physically. As this started to unfold, I could feel the fear growing within myself. My concern turned to worry, which grew into sadness, and then eventually I fell into a deep depression. I felt paralyzed with this growing sense of fear, and it was taking a toll on my mental health. After I was able to begin to accept the facts that yes, she was declining, and there was nothing I could really do about it, I was able to begin to work on my thoughts, which affected my emotions and my actions, and dig myself out of this pit of despair and begin to feel joy and gratitude once again. I'll explain a familiar pattern that I go through that once again emerged every time my wife goes through a significant change in her ability to do things. And maybe as you hear how I dealt with this experience, it may be of help to you and show you a pattern for you to conquer your fears. Before we get into that, I'd like to read a quick listener comment. Today's listener comment came from Tiffany Richardson. She commented on the Facebook post when we had reached 3,000 downloads for the podcast a little while ago. She wrote this: "Such a great podcast. I'm so happy for you. Keep up the great work. You are helping so many people by sharing your story." Thank you, Tiffany. I always appreciate it when I hear that the podcast is helping people. That is the main reason I've done this podcast, is to help people go through their journey with their loved one. All right, let's get into the topic at hand. I'll start out with a little bit of background. Now, Shanna's been dealing with Alzheimer's for about 12 years, but it's really been the last 6 years where we've seen significant changes. The first couple of years, it was just some cognitive repeating of questions and forgetfulness. But when the disease really started to take hold of her and eat away at her brain and her ability started to dwindle over time, I've seen her lose the ability to do many things in the last 6 years, such as being able to drive safely, go shopping on her own, do many things on her own. Simple household activities like doing the laundry and cooking. Not able to do the hobbies that she enjoyed, like putting together jigsaw puzzles or even reading. This turned into things like she needed help dressing herself. Her personal hygiene requires assistance. On to the point where she eventually required and needed 24/7 care and help. And she needs help just to do just about anything. Add to this her inability to communicate and speak over the last 3 years. Makes it difficult. She can't even tell people she's thirsty and would like a drink of water. So she is totally now dependent on other people just to help her get through the day. I've had a front row seat to all of this. And for the last 4 years, she has required and needed a deep level of care. For 2 of those years, I provided that care for her. And caring for her was one of the greatest things that I've ever done and have had the honor to do for my beloved wife. For the last 2 years, I've handed over that responsibility to a team of professionals at memory care centers. I returned to being her full-time husband, best friend, and advocate. Now, these last 2 years have been very different. For me, I'm less in the moment having stress and exhaustion because I'm not taking care of her 24/7. When I was taking care of her 24/7, I was so busy that I didn't have time sometimes to think about the changes that were going on. I just had to adapt and adjust. But these last 2 years, I've had lots of time to think and observe and see things. And this has caused me to become more worried and depressed. I think that when I was a full-time caregiver, I just didn't have the energy to be so worried and afraid. In between these various declines, there have been periods of time where things didn't change much. I call those the plateaus. That would become our new normal for a while. And it seems like just when we would get used to this new normal, next big change would start to happen. And I knew as time went on, things would continually change. For the most part of our journey so far, these were mostly cognitive changes for Shanna. And some physical things, but she was very strong and very active, very healthy. In fact, we walked quite a bit, even up until the last year or so. And even in the last year or so, I was able to get her to walk for about a half a mile before she would get really tired. But in this last year, and especially the last 6 or 8 months, things have changed in that area. Her recent physical decline has been a very hard thing for me to witness and to process. I would like to share with you what we have both gone through over the last few months, in the hope that you may learn how to deal with whatever crippling fear you may be experiencing of what may lie ahead for you and your loved one. About 8 months ago, I had a little bit of a foreshadowing. And in looking through my journal, I found this journal entry about 8 months ago. This is what I wrote. I am very much at peace with the way things are, and I'm completely worry-free about Shanna's care. Having said that, I do know that tougher times are ahead as Shanna's physical health begins to falter, and she gets weaker and is less able to move around independently. But like I'm always saying, I will enjoy today and not fear what might happen tomorrow. I absolutely have no control over what's going to happen to her. We will just react and adjust and adapt to whatever she has to deal with. I'm just grateful to know that the staff will be ready to handle whatever comes her way and help me to figure out the things that I need to do. I truly do not feel alone anymore in this experience, as I now have a whole team of experienced people to guide me through. As I realized how good the new facility was and how well Shanna was cared for, I was, at the first time, worry-free, and I was feeling really good. But I did have this foreshadowing that things might change. This was during the summer. And the summers here in Arizona are very hot. My opportunity to take Shanna out and go for long walks was pretty limited. So my plan was, as the winter was approaching and the weather would become nice, that I would build up Shanna's stamina. I would start taking her out for walks when I visited her and over time try and rebuild her stamina. So that was my plan. As it cooled off in November and December, I tried doing this. I had moderate success, but oftentimes I would take Shanna and overextend her physical abilities, and she would become exhausted. And we would come back to the facility after a walk, and she was just really tired. And I just had her sit on a recliner, and she almost fell asleep on me a couple of times. By the end of January, I became aware that I don't think my plan was going to happen. This is what I wrote on January 31st of this year. It seems we are bursting upon a new chapter. My goal and dream of having her walk a lot more has been tempered by the fact that she doesn't have a whole lot of energy and strength. In fact, she oftentimes has difficulty just standing up if she's been sitting down for a while. When I'm with her, I do take her for walks, but most of the times it's just to walk around the parking lot. A couple of days ago, I drove her to a nearby park. The interesting thing was getting in and out of the car. The first time she tried to get into the car, she didn't know how to do it. She was confused. She kept trying to just sit down on the seat. And when she finally did, I had to lift up her legs and spin them around to get her into the car. This is the first time I experienced this. Luckily, getting out of the car, she seemed to remember how to do that. So a lesson that I learned here is if it's been a long time since she's done something, I may have to be patient and help her out more. I think I just need to realize that her brain and her body are not working together well. That part of her brain that controls her body is deteriorating. I think I just need to also realize that her brain and body control is deteriorating. And I will just have to accept that and all the things that will come with that. In the meantime, I will do all in my power to help her stay strong and active and live the best life she can. I'm still grateful that she remains happy and loves to spend time with me. This is where I was beginning to sense changes in her physical ability. Watching her struggle to stand up after she was sitting for an hour or two really was startling me and freaking me out. That's when the fear began to grow. And my fear was based around the fact that I didn't want her to be in a wheelchair. I wanted her to be able to do things with me. And that was something that was really weighing heavily on me. Now, this was the beginning of me starting to see some changes. Now, the next week, on February the 4th, this is what I wrote. Today, when I was with Shanna, I noticed she was walking hunched over. That's just the best way to describe it. I asked her to try and stand up straight, and she tried to, and it got a little bit better. When we got to the car, she did not know how to get in again, and I almost had to throw her into the car. She just kept trying to sit down, but didn't know to move her legs. Eventually, we figured it out. I'm getting the feeling that some big changes are around the corner, and her ability to do some of the things may not be as easy. I was really, at this point, really starting to not be able to deny that Shanna was starting to have some physical challenges. Her lack of stamina and energy became a daily occurrence. I usually visit Shanna towards the end of the afternoon from about 2:00 till dinner time. And she's at her most tired at that time. So I was seeing the end of the day tiredness. Here's a example of things that I was starting to see more and more. When I showed up at 2:15 today, she was sitting at the front door. I said hello to her, and she just looked at me. No reaction, no response. She looked very tired. It took about a minute or two, but I finally knelt down right in front of her, got in front of her face, and she finally gave me a big smile and started to come out of her zombie-like tired state. This was something that I rarely experience, and now this was becoming a once-a-week kind of occurrence. Again, this all led to this mounting fear. Just 5 days later, on February 9th, this is what I recorded. A caregiver told me that Shanna had a very active day today, as well as yesterday. Last night after dinner, they had to put her into a walker to get her to go to her room after dinner, as she had no strength left in her legs. Now, my reaction to this was, part of me wants to believe this is just a rough patch that we're going through. This was me fighting off denial. I was denying that Shanna was at this point. And this is a typical stage in the beginning of all these changes. You start to see them, and I record them in my journal. It's interesting as I go back over this 2-3 week period, these occurrences happened, and that's what made me realize that it's time to start accepting it. But we'll get more on that in just a little bit. Again, just 3 days later, on February 12th, I recorded this. Just a quick note, I got a call from the facility. The med tech called me, letting me know that Shanna had a fall. She told me what happened and was able to tell me that Shanna was okay, and not too long after the fall, she was smiling. And she seemed to be doing okay, and that they would keep an eye on her. When I arrived, I started asking questions of what happened. I was told that they were in the middle of having their church services, and Shanna was standing up, and that a gentleman made a loud statement, and this startled Shanna. And as she took a few steps forward, she fell and tripped over a chair, falling on her side and then hitting her head. 4 days later, this was recorded. We've definitely hit the point where Shanna is unsteady. In the last week, she's probably fallen 3 times, or at least tried to sit down and miss the chair. She was tired again today, but I was told that she was dancing quite a bit in the morning. Now, this was all starting to really weigh upon me. She hadn't fallen but maybe 1 time before this, but in this time period, she was very unsteady. This started to weigh very heavily on me. I recorded this in my journal not too long after. It's going to be a battle for me to stay positive and not get depressed. I had a small bout of depression last week, and I thought I was able to get past it. But again, I hear it knocking at the door. Now, as I was struggling with all of this, it's hard to explain the fear and how it paralyzed me and how it changed the visits that I was there. I was always on the alert, asking lots of questions, making sure that they were watching over her, and it really fed my worry. A week later, this is what happened, and this just about broke me. And things became very real, and I could not deny what was going on. When I went to visit Shanna, the med tech said, "I need to talk to you." He told me that when they tried to get Shanna out of bed in the morning, she couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't put any pressure on her left leg, and that her knee was bent inward and seemed a little bit swollen. They said that they were able to get her to the bathroom and to the shower, but just even getting her to the toilet was laborious. So for the early part of the morning, they had her in a wheelchair to keep her off of her leg. As the day went on, she was able to get up and walk around. This was the event that made me go from denial and help me to flip the switch to begin acceptance. I was, again, deciding to put my trust in God. And that was key when the next test occurred. This happened on St. Patrick's Day. I decided to do something a little different. I decided to come visit her in the morning on a couple of times because I wanted to see how she was doing in the morning. I always saw her at the end of the day and she was tired. So I went at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and they were having some Irish dancers perform at the facility, and it was pretty cool. And we were enjoying all of that. I then took her back to her room to get her something. Actually, it was to change her shirt. I wanted to put on a St. Patrick's Day shirt that her sister purchased for her just the week before. I got that on her, and right after I got the shirt on her, she took a step and was not very steady. So I grabbed her and I said, "Are you okay?" She looked at me and smiled. So we went and we walked down the hallway to join the group again. And we were standing in the common area. And she had this look on her face that I'll never forget. She put her arm out to steady herself against the wall, but wasn't close enough. So I quickly grabbed her and I tried to move her to a nearby chair. And I got her about 2 feet in front of the chair, and then she just collapsed and became totally dead weight and fainted. Easily put her on the ground and looked at her. She didn't lose consciousness, but she was not very responsive. She was still breathing, and a little bit of panic ensued, and the caregivers called out for the med tech. She came running. She quickly took Shanna's vitals, took her oxygen level and her blood pressure. I felt Shanna's head. She was profusely sweating. She was having a hot flash and most likely was feeling lightheaded as well. And that's what caused her to collapse. She sat on the floor for about a minute. Her blood pressure was normal. Her oxygen level was great. We then lifted her up into the chair. And I sat next to her for 5 or 6 minutes, observing her. And she finally came back to being able to smile and answer questions with facial expressions. I asked her if she was okay, and she nodded. We sat in that chair for about 15 minutes, and then I got her up to walk her down the hallway just to see how she was doing. The interesting thing was I was scheduled to leave in about half an hour. I wanted to make sure she was okay. I talked to the med tech, and she told me that they would have somebody be with Shanna every time she was not sitting down, that she'd have someone by her side. This was something that really rocked me. Now, there is some history here. When Shanna lived at home with me, she had these hot flashes periodically that would cause her to be lightheaded, and we would need to sit her down. But since I was always there, I would be able to get her to lay down and cool her off with an ice pack. And these would pass in 5 minutes. So this was exactly that same exact thing. Now, I don't remember her having one of these in the last year or so, but that's not to say she doesn't have them. So as I was wrestling with this, I decided, okay, Ken, you can't keep worrying about all of these things. You have to learn to accept that this is where things are at. Now, this was a hard thing for me to do. I have to let go of all of the desires of doing things physically demanding with her, taking her for long walks in the park, doing things that require lots of energy. I just have to limit what we do to things that she can handle and accept that. And as I started to process that and accept that, I used a technique that I use in coaching. I use it on myself. This is how I was able to overcome the fear. So this coaching techniques is called a fact versus interpretation exercise. And this is how I was able to change my perception. And the way you do this is you write down all of the facts with no judgment or feelings attached to them. What are simply the facts? So let's do this in this case. Fact: Shanna has lost most of her strength and stamina. Fact, there will be a wheelchair in her future. Fact, she is now a fall risk and requires more help in standing up and getting around. Fact, this decline has not affected her happiness or her mood. She's still pretty happy, especially when I'm there. Fact, although she may be able to do some things on her own from time to time, it will eventually cease, and we will have to adapt. So those are the facts. What were my interpretations or my feelings and thoughts around these facts? I felt that Shanna would get frustrated and lash out at the caregivers and the other residents. I feared that Shanna would become uncooperative. I feared she would take out her frustrations on me and that my visits with her would no longer be pleasant moving forward. I feared that I would never be able to do any fun things with her again. I fear that this was the beginning of the end, that it's all downhill from here. Gone are the days of me feeling joy with her. These were the fears that I was having. Now, none of this has actually happened. I was just thinking, feeling, acting, projecting as if it has happened. This caused me to be fearful, depressed, and miserable. When I could no longer stand it, I decided to do something about it. And I looked at all of these fears and I realized that my feelings and interpretations of the fact were all based on fear and that they were inaccurate and untrue. I realized that I had bought into all of these untruths and they were holding me captive. It was time for me to free myself from this paralyzing fear and realized that there were a few more sobering facts for me to comprehend. And along with that, develop a new sense of true interpretations based on my faith and the experiences of dealing with decline over the 12 years down our journey together down Dementia Road. So these were some of the additional facts. That in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, people will eventually lose their physical abilities. They typically go from being independent to using a walker. And then eventually they use a wheelchair. And it eventually ends up that they become bedridden. This is what happens to most, if not all, who suffer from Alzheimer's. I've seen this in a lot of the other residents over the last couple of years. And this is something that Shanna will go through and that I will be by her side the entire time. I can't change this fact. I can't stop it from happening. I can't fix it. I can only choose to accept it and adapt. So now I've started telling myself, I will become the best wheelchair driver in the memory care facility. So these are some of the improved interpretations that I've adopted. Although Shanna is on this path of physical decline, she is not fully there. We're just at the beginning. And I need to enjoy every moment of every visit with her and enjoy whatever is left and remains of her mobility. I need to keep making memories. We're not alone in this. There's a great team at that facility who know how to work with people at every stage of this disease. And I still do not need to worry about her care. I can trust them. Over the years, my faith in God has allowed me to accept and adjust to each new chapter of our journey. This will not change. I need to remember all of the tender mercies that have happened over all of these last few years and have faith and expect them to continue as we go all the way to the end. Joy can be felt from a wheelchair, and it can be felt from a hospital bed. We will both learn to feel joy together and not let any of the circumstances and consequences of the disease rob us of that future joy. I continue to gain strength in witnessing my wife Shanna's courage and her willingness to accept everything that the disease does to her. Never complaining, all while smiling and bringing joy to those who are in her presence. So with all of this new perspective that I've had for the last week or so, I'm not depressed anymore. I am mindful of Shanna's ability or lack of ability to do physical things and trying my best to just be present with her and feel joy with her. And it has had a dramatic effect on how I feel when I'm with her and when I'm alone thinking about these things. Now, this remains a work in process. I'm still learning lots of lessons along the way, riding the ups and downs. I am feeling grateful that I finally accepted this new chapter in our journey. By being able to release the fear, I know that there will be both joy and some sadness ahead. But the sadness does not have to be heavy. It's okay to mourn and be sad, but I don't have to feel heavy about it. By leaning on others and on God, my burdens will be made light, to the point that I'll be able to continue to survive Alzheimer's and not let the disease define my wife or rob us of feeling love and joy moving forward. Thank you for listening to another episode. This one was very personal. And I hope, as I shared what I've gone through over the last few months, it might help you in dealing with whatever you're dealing with. Again, I appreciate your time in listening to the podcast. And I hope that you will be able to conquer your fears and be able to feel joy with your loved one. You have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching an episode of the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I recommend that you watch the first 13 episodes in order. That way you can learn about our backstory. This will make understanding later episodes much easier. To help you with this, I've created a playlist. It's called Surviving Alzheimer's Podcast in Order. That way you can listen to all the episodes in the order that they were created. The mission of the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast is to educate and inspire caregivers, family, and friends who are on their own unique journey down dementia road with their loved one. I would really appreciate it if you could share this episode to anyone who you feel would benefit from it. Additional ways for you to help us reach others are to hit the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to be notified of new episodes. All of these actions will encourage the YouTube algorithm to share this episode and podcast to other potential viewers.